Hello and welcome to another tech tip from FARO. My name's Horton and I'm a 3D documentations engineer for FARO UK. During this tech tip I'd like to run you through how to use the Video Pro app available in FARO Scene. There are two versions available. There is a free version which limits you on the ability to do stereo videos, and also when saving the videos you have a banner with FARO and Scene running across your movie. The other version is Video Pro, which is a chargeable solution, so please speak to your local account manager for costs. So on to the video app. The first thing you'll need to check is whether you've previously installed it. If you don't have this icon on your desktop, what you can do is go into the apps and look through the loaded applications, because it might be that you've not got it active. If not, you can download it by using the link on the App Store and then installing it in the normal fashion. When you've installed it, you should get this link, irrespective of which version you've added. The example I'm going to use for this particular movie is of the piazza outside the new BBC building in London. As you can see, and as you'd expect, in such a busy environment, there are lots of moving traffic and people around and about, so the first thing I need to do is get rid of some of this data. Now I could go in and delete it, but what I prefer to do is use a clipping plane to modify and hide everything inside. In preparation for this guide, I've already created my project point cloud, which I can see quite clearly by the fact that the create project point cloud icon is grayed out. So I can now go ahead and create my clipping plane. Now what I tend to do is when I'm creating clipping planes, I work in an orthographic mode. So I'm just going to fit my view there, and then I tend to look at it from the top. First, add a clipping plane onto the system. And then all we need to do is rotate it to the relevant angle to suit what we're doing, and then adjust the size and scale using the object handles in X, Y and Z to modify its location. So all I'm going to do is modify the clipping box itself just by dragging the object handles down. Now what I can do is when I get to the bottom, by zooming a little bit further, if I pull the handle up from the bottom and try and balance it just over the floor, then what I need to do is some fine tuning afterwards to make sure that I'm only cropping out the people. First off, I need to set this clipping box to be internal or hide all the interior objects, and as you can see I'm hovering just above the floor and covering the majority of the data. But in this instance I know there's a slope on the floor, so what I can do is start to fine-tune the clipping box using the transformation feature. To get to this, right-click on your relevant clipping box, go to Properties and Transformation. Choose the axis in which you want to modify, which is the Z, and choose the scale in which you want to work to. So I'm going to use 1/10 and literally just slide the slider bar down until I can just see the floor disappearing. If I over exaggerate it, you can see this grey area where the clipping box is cut through the floor, so I'm just going to lift that up a little bit until all the floor reappears. I could go down a little bit finer to 1/100th, but that will do for now. When I'm happy, click OK, and then all I need to do is make the clipping box a little bit bigger, a little bit narrower on the screen. So I'm just going to stretch this one out almost up to the bollards and down to the end, and then pull in the side handles as well. Now I'm not going to do all of this. If I was doing this properly, in the example I've got here, I'd put in multiple clipping boxes to cover all the data, as you can see here, and I've named them so I know exactly where to go back to. So there you can see, without too much hassle, I've hidden the interior of all the clipping box and all the noise in the data, even down to the fact I can start to see all the names on the floor, which is synonymous to the piazza. So when you're happy with the data that you've created, you've trimmed it all up, put your clipping boxes in, deleted any extraneous data that you need to, we can start to work on creating the video. The video app actually works on viewpoints. So what we first need to do is work around the model and create a series of viewpoints. One little tip, if you've got any clipping boxes in the model, make sure they're shown as visible or invisible first off. To create our viewpoints, we go to the Manage Viewpoints icon. We click the down arrow, then we can click on the Create Viewpoint. We can give it a unique name and a number, and the number will start to count up as we create additional viewpoints. Alternatively, you can use keyboard shortcuts, so using the Control and F2 button we can create the viewpoints a lot faster. So what I'm going to do is start to create a series of about half a dozen viewpoints. Hit the Control F2 button, the next one comes up in the series, click OK, moving to our next location. When navigating in this mode, always be aware of your center of rotation so you can get a nice even video. When you are creating camera paths, ideally what you want is a series of evenly spaced camera paths so that when you finally create the movie, it's creating the frames on a regular basis or a regular interval. So I'm just going to put 5 camera positions in for now. Now what you can also do to check the camera positions, or if you accidentally fly outside the model, you can go back to any camera position you want in your tree on the left hand side, right click and click Activate, and it will jump back to the last point. So it's quite easy to delete a camera position and go back and add in another one. I'm going to go back to the original camera point, and then what I can do is to sort of simulate what the movie is going to look like before I even get to the video app. If I press the F2 button, then it will start to fly to each camera position in turn and show me roughly what kind of view I'm going to get. Alternatively, use Shift and F2 and it will go backwards through your movie sequence. So that's our path created. When we're happy with our camera locations, we can now go into Create a new camera path. On the left hand side here, you can see that we have a series of viewpoints that we can use. I'm going to use the new ones that we've just created. You can actually use any one of these camera paths more than once. So for instance, if you're walking down a corridor and you wanted to fly into a room and have a look around, if the corridor was camera 1 but the room was camera 2, you could set camera 1 first, you'd fly down the corridor, go into the room of camera 2, then put a second version of camera 1 after camera 2 to fly out into the corridor, and so on and so forth. When you're happy that you've got your viewpoints created, you can preview your path, and you'll notice that I've got a series of lines on the screen. The red line denotes the camera path and all the camera positions interpolated between each viewpoint. The yellow will represent your center of field, and the orange represents the area above the camera. If I press play, it should now sequence through the camera positions so I can see that my field of view is relatively sensible and I've not flown inside any walls or looking in an obscure direction where I can't see anything. Rather than run through that, I'm going to pause and close the dialog because I'm fairly happy with what I've created. Next thing we need to do is save our camera path and give it a sensible name, and then click Save. If at any point in the future you want to come back to these, then you can do by clicking on the little down arrow next to the icon for the Video Pro app and selecting the Edit Path icon. So, before we go through and create our video, I just need to modify a few of the settings to suit the video output. If I go into my visibility settings, pretty much I know I'm going to work in perspective mode with smooth shading. I'm not going to worry too much about the background settings. If I go into my scan points, then I'm going to work with manual scan points. Clear view is not affected by the video anyway, but one of the things I am going to do is turn on super sampling. Now the super sampling in effect renders the image at a larger resolution than your screen and then reduces it, so you get less gaps in the data and makes it clearer. When I'm happy with that, go on to layers. If I'd gone in and put matched objects such as spheres or targets, I would turn those off. In the extras tab, I would also turn off the scan positions which I've already done because I don't want to see the scan positions in my movie. When I'm happy, click OK. Then we click on the next button. Now in here is where we have the ability to create images and video format. In effect, the video is created from a series of images that are taken at several frames per second based on the distance of your scan positions and the time that you've created. If you're working on a fairly large project and you have access to multiple computers, what you can do is when you've created your viewpoints, save a copy of the project, share that project between colleagues, and then when you create your images, you can do your frame rates from a start and end point based on 1 to 100, 101 to 200, and so on and so forth. Render those out as images, and then using the down arrow next to your Video Pro app, you can create a video from images and simply combine all the images created on all the individual machines. I'm just going to keep it fairly simple for now. I'm going to create a location for my movie and give it a file base name for the images. I tend to use MP4s because I know they can be used on most portable devices at the same time. And I'm going to put a location for my video as well and give it a name. Next, we go on to the resolution. Now, all these settings have an effect on how long your video is going to take. It's classed that high definition is above 1920. I tend to work roughly around the sort of 1280, 720 mark because I know when I'm going to use it for a presentation, I'm going to reduce it anyway, so it's going to look a little bit better. Frames per second comes down to the time you've got and how smooth you want. Again, it's down to personal preference. Easiest thing is work through a few examples that suit what your output is required at first. The bitrate comes down to the compression. So the higher the bitrate and the more detail is being retained within your movie. Again, default is high. So then we have to decide on our duration. Now I'm going to create, say, a 45-minute or 45-second video. If I add 45 seconds in, I need to remember to go and add or change the duration in minutes, and that will automatically update the frame rate. We can start to add in acceleration for the movie, but in this instance I'm not going to bother. If we're using the same settings over and over again, i.e. we've done some testing and we found that we like what we've got, then I can simply click save and it will save out the file to give you a location that you can reuse time and time again. When you're happy, just click start. Now again, what I tend to do on my machine is if I know I'm going to create a movie, I'll get everything set up, I'll add my clipping planes in, I'll go in and create my viewports, I'll make sure I've got my registration key, my colours applied, and everything's ready to go. Then I will save the project, close the machine down, and then start from scratch, just opening scene, giving my machine absolute maximum power. To summarise, register and clean your data, ready for your recording. When you're happy with that, create your project point cloud, and then create any required clipping boxes to remove other data. Set up your viewpoints. Create and save your camera path. Remember, you can use viewpoints more than once in your camera path. Set up your display settings, i.e. set up your super sampling, etc. Choose whether to loop the video, i.e. do you want the video to return back to the start point, which is particularly good when you are creating movies for exhibitions and things like that. And save your camera path. Preview your video to make sure you're happy with the path. Decide on relevant locations for images and the video, plus the video format. Set your resolution, your frame rate and your duration. Save your settings if you know you want to come back and use them again, or load your settings from a previously used video, and then press start. Now what I'm going to do is show you the video I've created. I've added some additional information into this using the standard Windows Movie Maker. I actually recorded this video at 1280 by 720 with 4x4 super sampling. That's it for another FARO tech tip. I hope it's been of use, and thank you for watching. If you want to see any further movies that I create, please feel free to follow me on Twitter. Thank you.